Before we get to the story, I'd like to say thanks so much for visiting the channel. I'm going to be uploading alternate history horror stories exploring the darkest possibilities of what could have been. So if that sounds good, please drop a like and don't forget to subscribe. It means a lot, especially as the channel continues to grow. I hope you enjoy the story. My name's Laura Bennett, and I've spent 9 years working field biology surveys across some of the least studied stretches of wilderness this country still has left. The kind of remote, low-traffic terrain that rarely gets consistent research attention because there's just not enough funding to justify it. I've catalogued rare birds, tracked reintroduced predator populations, spent entire seasons chasing down evidence of species everyone assumed had gone locally extinct decades earlier. I'm careful by training, skeptical of my own excitement, the kind of scientist who double-checks a result 3 times before letting herself believe it. We were 4 weeks into a routine camera trap survey in a stretch of forest nobody had bothered mapping thoroughly in over 20 years, cataloguing whatever wildlife still moved through that isolated terrain, when my field assistant, a sharp young researcher named James Johnson, pulled the footage that changed everything about how the rest of that season unfolded. "You need to see this," he said, turning his laptop toward me at our base camp, and I remember the specific quality of his voice, excitement layered over something else, something closer to unease that I didn't fully register until I'd actually watched the clip myself. The footage showed an animal moving through the trap's infrared field, roughly deer-sized, and my first instinct, trained by 9 years of doing exactly this work, was to start running through possibilities, except nothing about it matched any possibility I actually had available. It moved low to the ground, using 4 legs in a gait that looked almost ordinary at a glance, except there were 2 more legs, thin and loose, dragging along behind it, not injured exactly, just unused, swinging with each stride like limbs that hadn't quite finished growing in, or had simply never been needed. "Run it back," I said, and James did, and I watched it again, slower this time, cataloguing details with the same methodical care I'd apply to any unidentified specimen. Its hide wasn't fur, wasn't scale, a wet-looking grey surface that seemed, even through the grainy compression of trap camera footage, to shift very slightly, a slow ripple across its flank, like something moved beneath the surface independent of the animal's actual stride. "What is it?" James asked, and I didn't have an answer for him, which itself was strange enough that it kept me staring at that frozen frame far longer than I normally would. It had no face. I want to be precise about that because it's the detail that unsettled me most on that first viewing. Where a head should have been, there was instead a soft, tapered swelling, and near the end of the clip, as the animal paused briefly at the edge of the frame, that swelling split open along a vertical seam, revealing not eyes or a mouth in any conventional sense, but a ring of small dark openings circling what should have been a face, several of them flexing open and shut in a rhythm that didn't match anything else happening in the footage. No wind, no sound, no visible stimulus prompting the motion at all. "It's not in any database I know of," I told James, and I meant it as a pure statement of fact rather than the beginning of the strange several weeks that followed. We pulled footage from every camera in that section of forest over the following days, hoping for a second sighting that might give us more to work with. And what we found instead deepened the mystery rather than clarifying it. The animal appeared exactly once per night, never in more than a single camera, regardless of how densely we'd clustered our trap network. And every single clip carried a timestamp exactly 11 minutes off from what our synced, independently verified camera clocks should have recorded. Not random drift. Precisely 11 minutes every time across cameras that had no possible mechanism for sharing that specific error. That's not a glitch pattern, our team's technician, Robert Chen, told me after running diagnostics on every affected unit twice over. A glitch would be inconsistent, different units drifting different amounts. This is uniform. Something's producing that exact 11-minute offset deliberately, or the equipment somehow responding to the animal itself in a way I can't explain through any normal malfunction. I want to be honest that my first serious hypothesis, the one I clung to longest out of professional habit, was contamination or hoax. Some prankster with sophisticated equipment messing with a research survey for reasons of their own. That hypothesis held for exactly 4 more days until I saw the animal myself, in person, close enough that no camera trick or costume could have produced what I actually witnessed. I was checking a trap along a narrow game trail near dusk, alone, which in hindsight was a mistake I won't repeat, when I heard something moving through the brush ahead of me, slow, deliberate, not the panicked crash of a startled animal, but a measured, unhurried approach that immediately set every instinct I had on edge. It stepped into the trail maybe 30 feet ahead of me, and seeing it directly, unfiltered by grainy infrared footage, was worse than anything the camera clips had prepared me for. The wet grey hide rippled continuously now that I could see it clearly, a slow, rolling motion that never quite settled, like watching something breathe from underneath a surface that wasn't skin, so much as a covering draped over whatever actually made up its body. It stood there, motionless except for that constant, unsettling ripple, and the soft swelling where a head should have been split open exactly the way it had in the footage. That ring of small openings flexing in a pattern I still couldn't connect to anything in its immediate environment. I didn't move. 9 years of field training kicked in, the same instinct that's kept me safe around genuinely dangerous predators more than once. Freeze, assess, don't provoke a reaction you can't predict. It didn't approach further. It simply stood there, that ring of openings continuing their slow, independent flexing. And I had the distinct, uncomfortable sensation of being studied rather than simply observed. The same feeling you get when you realize a person across a room has been watching you for longer than casual glance would explain. After what felt like several minutes, but was probably closer to 30 seconds, it turned, unhurried, and moved back into the brush, that extra pair of loose limbs dragging behind it exactly the way the footage had shown. And I stood on that trail for a long time afterward before I trusted my own legs enough to walk back to camp. I reported the encounter to the rest of the team that evening, and I want to describe the specific quality of the silence that followed, because it told me everyone had been quietly hoping, the way I had, that this would resolve into something explainable before it ever came to a direct human encounter. We need to consider whether this is actually safe to keep studying, Robert said. And I remember bristling at that suggestion initially. 9 years of professional instinct, pushing back against the idea of walking away from what was, by any measure, the discovery of a lifetime. "We don't have enough data yet to justify pulling out," I said. "One undocumented species, however unusual, doesn't automatically mean danger." "It's not just unusual," James said, quiet, and something in his voice made me actually listen instead of dismissing it as excess caution. "I went back through every clip again last night. It's not just showing up in our traps randomly. Look at the pattern." He pulled up a map of our entire trap network, camera locations marked against the terrain, and overlaid the specific nights and locations where the animal had appeared. Laid out that way, the pattern was impossible to miss, and impossible to explain as coincidence. It wasn't moving through our survey area randomly, the way wildlife typically does, following food sources or territorial boundaries with only incidental overlap with our camera placements. It was moving specifically toward whichever camera we'd most recently repositioned every single time, appearing there within a night or two of us relocating equipment, as though it were tracking not the terrain itself, but our own research activity directly. "It's watching us work," Robert said, voicing the thought I think all three of us had already arrived at separately. Not just reacting to cameras being in its territory, following where we specifically move our attention. I spent the following 2 days trying to build a scientific framework that could accommodate what we were seeing, and I want to admit honestly how badly that effort failed. Every category I tried to force this animal into, cryptid misidentification, undiscovered relic population, some kind of localized genetic anomaly in a known species, collapsed under the weight of details that simply didn't fit. No known animal alters camera timestamps. No known animal demonstrates target tracking of a research team's specific movements rather than simple territorial defensiveness. No known animal has a face that isn't a face at all, opening into a ring of independently moving apertures that seem to be sensing something the rest of us can't perceive. The final encounter, the one that ended our survey entirely, happened on the 6th night after my first direct sighting, when the whole team had gathered at a central camera position to attempt a coordinated observation. All three of us present together, hoping that safety in numbers and combined attention might let us actually document something useful instead of another brief, unsettling glimpse. It arrived a little after 11 that night, stepping into the small clearing where we'd set up. And this time, it didn't stop at a cautious distance the way it had with me alone on that trail. It came closer, slow and unhurried as always, until it stood maybe 15 feet from where the three of us stood together, close enough that I could hear, for the first time, a faint sound accompanying it. Not breathing, not any vocalization I could easily categorize, more like a low, wet, rhythmic pulse matching, I realized with a chill that settled deep into my chest, the exact rhythm of those small openings flexing open and shut around its faceless head. "Nobody move," I said, quiet, and I felt James and Robert both go rigid beside me, all three of us standing frozen in that small clearing, while something that matched no biological category any of us could name studied us with whatever passed for it as attention. It was Robert's radio, clipped to his vest, that broke the standoff, crackling suddenly with a burst of static that made all three of us flinch. and the animal reacted instantly. That ring of openings snapping fully open all at once, wider than we'd seen them open in any prior encounter, and the wet, rhythmic pulse sound intensified into something with real urgency behind it. "Back away, slowly," I said, already moving myself, and the three of us retreated together, careful, deliberate steps, watching that creature the entire time. And it didn't pursue exactly, but it didn't retreat either, simply tracking our movement with that ring of openings. Following our retreat with the same unhurried attention it had shown every step of this entire encounter. We made it back to the tree line, and once we judged the distance safe enough, broke into a full retreat toward camp, none of us speaking until we'd put real distance between ourselves and that clearing. It was Robert, once we'd finally caught our breath back at base camp, who said what I think all three of us had already silently decided. "We're done," he said. "I don't care what we've documented so far. Whatever that thing is, it's not simple wildlife, and I'm not willing to keep pushing our luck finding out exactly what category it actually belongs to. I want to be honest that some part of me, the part that spent 9 years chasing exactly this kind of discovery, resisted that conclusion even as I understood, standing there in the aftermath of that encounter, that he was right. We packed out the following morning, pulling every camera from that section of forest, and I submitted our footage and field notes to the university with a report that stuck carefully to observable fact, refusing to speculate beyond what we could actually document and defend under scrutiny. The footage generated exactly the kind of academic interest you'd expect: excited, skeptical, demanding more evidence than 3 unsettled biologists and a stack of trap camera clips could actually provide. A follow-up survey team went in 8 months later, better funded, better equipped, with specific instructions to focus their camera network in that same stretch of forest where we'd made our final observation. They found nothing, not a single frame of footage across an entire season, no timestamp anomalies, no unusual sightings, nothing to suggest anything had ever moved through that terrain beyond the ordinary, well-documented wildlife any competent survey would expect to find there. I don't know what to make of that absence, honestly. Whether it means the animal genuinely never existed outside whatever strange window our own survey happened to intersect, or whether it simply understood, in whatever way something like that understands anything, that its presence had already been noticed once and had no interest in being found a second time. I still work field biology, still chase down unusual sightings and unexplained wildlife reports the way I always have, but I turn down assignments in that particular stretch of forest now every time they come up, and I've never fully explained why to colleagues who ask, because I don't think I could make the explanation land the way it actually felt, standing in that clearing, watching something that wasn't any animal I had a name for study the three of us back with the same careful, patient attention we'd been giving it all along.